Test, test. Oh, good. So I may be a smidge early, but we're going to start. I've unmuted the mic here at the podium, and I have clicked the record button. So I think we're in good shape to start our training today. I'm Valerie Yantz. I'm part of the Public Health Training HUI, and we're here today to focus on a topic of Hawaii early learning programs for children, creating the system our children and families deserve. And let me get it started here. There we go. The organizers are myself and Camille Cristobal and Christopher Lee. We organized these over a year ago for the entire year, so we're happy that you hang in there with us. We are all part of the Western Region Public Health Training Center that involves us in Hawaii, the Public Health Training HUI, Nevada, California, Pacific Islands, Arizona, and now we're starting to partner with Hawaii Public Health Institute. They are now taking over the management of the grant, and they have been a partner all of these years, but it made more sense to fund the grant through them, and they are one of our fabulous public health organizations in the state of Hawaii. So we have all of these sponsors. This is the usual page that you see, the HUI, and I'm from the University of Hawaii Office of Public Health Studies, the Western Region Public Health Training Center. We're all part of the Public Health Learning Network, and we want to give special thanks to Queens Medical Center. They allow us to use this auditorium free of charge as a community partner. And again, we've been very fortunate with all of our national accrediting bodies. We have 5 different professional continuing education, and that is our main focus with this grant, is to offer continuing education to our public health workforce. So social work, substance abuse counselors, health education specialists, dietitians and nutritionists, and nurses. These are the linking competencies. They're all slightly different in the different categories. I see I forgot to change the dietitian ones, but it has to do with communication, public health sciences, and strategies to deal with the early learning for children. If you want to claim a continuing ed credit, you need to attend the entire webinar. You're on an honor system, and at the end, Camille is not here in the auditorium, but she gets on and she does a mail merger of everyone who signed in and sends you an individual survey. And this is the first time, but I went in and made a copy. So you would be getting an email from Camille Cristobal. I created this one so that it went to me, and it will have the title and the date. And then you see the blue hyperlinks down below. You click those and you do the survey. So when she's preparing the certificates, she looks to see, your survey is anonymous. We just get a list of who completed the surveys. We look to see who has completed it. So be sure, those that are online, be sure you complete this. Those in the auditorium, we have given you a blue hard copy evaluation, and that is adequate. We have new College of Nursing that does the continuing nursing credits, asks that we use their slide, and so they usually like to have the learning objectives on their slide, so we use their slide for their learning objectives. And I saw in Barbara's PowerPoint, she will go over these, but she's going to review ways and the current state of the system and tell you about the different programs and resources. None of the planners or the presenter have any relevant fiscal relationship to disclose. And for nursing, you have to go to a special website that's listed here, the CNE, nursingarizona.edu. Most of the nursing know that. I will put that in the chat for you, nurses. Again, it's an honor system, and you have to complete the full training and then fill out this evaluation, and then you will be awarded a certificate directly from them. And the website looks like this when you click on it. Then there's a special extra step for CHES, for the continuing health education, and you have to use this link and fill out this survey. The website looks like that. And in this survey, you will be giving your CHES number. And for that continuing ed, we have to turn in the CHES numbers before you can claim your continuing ed. So each national body of professional groups have a slightly different procedure. It would be great maybe in another decade or two that they just all standardize it, and then we just could use the same pathway. The other wonderful thing is that we have the wonderful digital online technology of Zoom. If you are having any trouble, just click this link here and re-register and join us. And I do have the record button on, and it will be posted at my YouTube after the training is over. And I have a new announcement, is that the University of Arizona is created a place on the web. It uses a software called Moodle, Noodle with an M. And this is the new link, and the trainings for this year have just been uploaded, and you can click on them and listen to them and take I think it's 4 or 5 questions, and you can get continuing ed for any that you missed. Right now, we had to go to each body. So right now it's for nutritionists and for health educators, and the nursing is pending. I have not taken this to social work or CSAP yet. So just give us another month. I'll probably have the same slide, and hopefully we'll get enduring materials for all the groups if we can bring it online. So that, I couldn't ever do that. Camille and I and Christopher could not do that before. It was a lot of tracking, and it cost extra monies. But the University of Arizona is now wanting to do it, and they created this. Now, I don't know how many of you online have ever seen the front of Queens Conference Center. It's on the corner of Punch Bowl and Beretania. This is what it looks like. It's a beautiful building with beautiful art decoration. The reason I'm showing this slide is that for the people in the auditorium and anyone online that happens to come in December, we cannot use the usual door that you come in. They're having their huge Christmas luncheon for the Queen's employees, and it will all be blocked off. So this door in the front, that's usually the emergency room, emergency exit, will be open this one time for us to enter. So everybody in the auditorium, you get it, you know where this is. It's right on Beretania. I'm going to be telling you that next month also. So either you received from Camille Cristobal a link for all of the handouts, and you just pick on the blue, on the hyperlinks, or if you're in the auditorium, we have the handouts of the evaluation form, or you'll get the email from, and we have the flyer for next month, and then the certificate, which Camille emails out to everyone after you've done the evaluation. Now we're finally ready to get into the content and meet the trainer, Barbara DeBarge. I'm just meeting her today, but I've gotten to know her online, and I found out about her area of expertise in early learning for children when she's at the University of Hawaii Center on Family, and they do a brown bag lunch series, and her name was listed, and I immediately contacted her, and I don't think she had any idea what I was talking about for a while, but now she knows a lot about our Western Region Public Health Training Center. She is actually the interim director of the Center on Family. It's a wonderful center that's within UH, and she is a developmental psychiatrist by training, and has worked in many different collaborations to support children and families. And she's a huge advocate of early learning system in Hawaii. And you can see at the bottom, she has her degrees in master's and PhD in psychology. And I won't read all of that, but you can read it, and you should have your slides so you can get it. And this is her opening title slide, and I'd like to invite her up here and have her share with us about her information that she has on these slides. And I've seen them, they look very exciting, and I'm looking forward to her presentation. Welcome.
Well, welcome, and thank you for taking your lunch hour to share with each other. I'm honored to be here. Looking at the sign-in sheet, it seems that most of the folks that are here physically are social workers. So for today's game plan, because of the distance learning format, it's more of a lecture focus. I do have a 5-minute video to show you, and a couple places where I'm going to stop and ask for a little interaction or some self-reflective questions. And I'll also try to remember to stop at appropriate places to ask for questions. But feel free to raise your hand in the middle, especially if you have something to clarify. And folks at a distance, please feel free to share your questions and comments, and Valerie will send them on to the rest of us. I apologize in advance if the diacritical markings in my PowerPoint are not correct. I know how to do it in Word, but not in PowerPoint. So as Valerie said, I'm with the UH Center on the Family in Manoa, and we are an organization that really works at the intersection of research and community collaboration. So we do original research, and most recently it's been in the areas of early literacy, adolescent development, family health, and intergenerational influences across generations in the family in terms of both physical and mental health and economic well-being. We do needs assessments and community program evaluations in areas of child protective services, homelessness, substance abuse prevention and treatment, and teacher professional development in early childhood programs. We do community education more often through the development of curricula or educational materials, but we also do some direct service. And we heavily invested in the area of data for informing policy and planning decisions. And that's part of what I'm here to talk about today. So our website is easy to find, uhfamily.hawaii.edu, and most of our publications are available PDF for online reading or download. So I invite you all to take a look later on. Okay. So I guess when the PowerPoint got translated from the template I'd used to this one, some things changed a little bit. But here's my vision. Here's why I'm here today. Here's why I come into UH every day. To work to see that every child in our state has a safe and nurturing environment that supports their healthy development, whether it's at home or outside the home, and that every family has access to affordable childcare or early learning programs, if they choose to use them, that meet their needs and their family values. And just so we're on a shared page here, I'm talking about really a whole early learning system, which is more than preschool. That's probably what comes to your mind first when you think early learning, preschool, getting kids ready for school. But it's actually a more integrated system that starts prenatally and supports children and families in their child rearing up through kindergarten entry and through the early elementary years. So when we have healthcare systems that allow for children to have healthy and welcome births, where they're raised in families that are nurturing and safe and able to meet their basic needs, then you're more likely to see kids in your state enjoying on-track health and developmental progress. When families need support services, when they have equitable access to those services, and we have high quality early learning programs available to children when families need, as well as alignment or sort of everyone being on the same page and communication between these different providers and active transition, help children make their first steps into kindergarten, then the endpoint should be that a higher percentage of our keiki, our young children, are ready for success in school. So I'm going to focus today on some of the more common outside of the home early learning settings. So we have center-based childcare and preschool. In Hawaii, childcare centers, whether they're infant toddler centers, which serve age birth through 2, or childcare centers, also called preschools, which can serve from 2 through 5, but not all programs serve that full age range. In our state, they're licensed by the Department of Human Services, the Child Care Division. There are also license exempt centers in our state. That's primarily the public schools, so the DOE, EOEL preschool classrooms, DOE special education classrooms, and the public charter school preschool classrooms are license exempt, and military childcare is also license exempt. Family childcare homes are regulated by the state, but they're less formal settings. They're often less expensive. Families may feel that it's more nurturing, more natural, more home-like, and oftentimes families choose family childcare because they'll keep their child with the same provider, you know, from early infancy on up through kindergarten entry. So in our state, family childcare homes where a person serves 3 to 6 children that are not related to the provider in the provider's own home are required to be regulated by the state. If your individual is caring for only 1 or 2 unrelated children, then you're not under the purview of DHS. Family, friend, and neighbor care is actually where the majority of our children probably are, and this can be paid or unpaid, and it's the informal system of babysitters, next door neighbors, grandma, aunties, uncles, caring for the child, either in the child's home or their own home. And show of hands, are any of you FFN providers? Okay, we've got one in the back. Tremendous resource for families. And then unique to Hawaii, we have a large number of family-child interaction programs. You may also hear them called parent participation in preschools. And these are not childcare programs, but they are early learning programs. So in our facile programs, they're usually 2 mornings a week for a few hours a morning, and the child attends with parent or other caretaker. And it's set up very similar to a childcare classroom where there's activities, there's learning stations that are set by the teacher, but the family member is with the child the whole time and circulates through the learning stations with the child and is there to sort of support their learning and learn how to be their child's first teacher. Our facile programs generally have a dual focus on early learning and direct benefits for the child, and then family strengthening and parent education. So many of them combine the morning group format with either a monthly parent meeting or home visiting functions, and often they use curriculum such as parents as teachers. Other settings include early intervention or home visiting that serve a small number of kids in our state. So again, icebreaker. Raise your hand, how many people in this room are parents? Okay, I think we got about 95% here. I'd like you to turn to your neighbor, and those of you at home, you can just think, who cared for your children from that span from when they were born through when they entered school? And what word or words first come to your mind when you think about your experiences with childcare? And on a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is not at all important and 10 it's crucial, how important do you think childcare is as a community and social issue? I'll give you a minute to think about that. Are we getting any written comments? Okay. In the audience, any words you want to share?
Hi, my name is Gladys. I'm with, I work for Office of Public Guardian, but I have an 11-year-old old daughter. My husband actually stayed home the first 2 years during the day, and then I care of her at night. So, and then by the age of 2, she went to preschool. So we didn't have any outside babysitters.
So you were happy with your experience?
Yes.
Oh, hi, I'm a transplant originally from Florida. I'd come to Hawaii 38 years ago just to have a nursing a contracted job in nursing, and got married and had 2 children. So I would describe 2 words, exhilarating and exhausting, because there were no other extended family here. And I think that's one of the unique situations to look at. I think that I grew up with such a big Italian Sicilian family, and with many extended cousins and grandparents. And yeah, it's too bad my kids didn't have that. So it was exhausting, but exhilarating too.
Definitely. And any online comments?
Okay, from online we have, there's a bunch. Okay, so we have family, myself till 1.5 years old and then kindergarten, my mother-in-law and a paid in-home caregiver cared for my first son. My second son I brought to an in-home caregiver friend of a friend informal network.
When I talk with families, we've had a lot of babies at the Center on the Family, that I hear a lot of, it's expensive, I'm frustrated, I can't find it. We start trying to put ourselves on waiting lists as soon as we know that we're expecting. So clearly it's a very fraught issue for families, and one of the most important that you're going to face. If a family member is not able to be home with the child, particularly during their infancy years, finding a suitable place to entrust your most precious family members is a key goal, and one of the central concerns of parents' lives. So we have a little bit of shared understanding of what we mean by early learning, a little bit of an idea that it's of personal relevance to most every family. And so let's talk about some of the research. So how does high quality programming support child and family well-being? Really, early childhood presents us with a unique window of opportunity because it's a sensitive period for development that has potential for lifelong consequences for good or ill. Early learning programs support family economic stability when they're available and affordable. And we have a very high return on investment, or sort of financial benefit at the public level with quality early childhood care. So I'm going to get into each of those in more detail. And one thing I want you to take away from this, so you remember, when you leave this room and next week, early experience matters. And why does it matter? A lot of it has to do with the incredible just explosion of neurological and brain development that's happening in the first few years of life. So this is a time of incredibly rapid growth, of sort of paradoxically increased specialization in the brain, as well as increased communication and integration between different areas of the brain. It's also a period of important right sizing, or sort of pruning back from the early abundance. And much of this is in response to or sensitive to what's going in the child's rearing environment. So, for example, our adult brains, we have about 100 to 200 billion neurons or nerve cells that transmit information via electrical impulses. And kids have more than adults. So as the neurons develop their synaptic branches, the little branches at the end of each nerve cell that either transmit or accept the neurotransmitters that allow communication between the brain cells. As those branches proliferate, the child's brain actually starts increasing in size and volume. So at birth, we have about 30% of adult brain weight. That reaches 70% by age 2 and about 90% by age 6. At birth, each neuron has about 2,500 of these synaptic branches. By age 2 or 3, there's about 15,000, so tremendous proliferation. And this is about double what we have for adults. The glial cells are also about doubling in number and beginning the process of myelination, which is coating each neuron with the fatty substance that makes up your white matter that allow for faster transmission of electrical impulses and greater efficiency in your brain. And so this picture here is just showing an example of the proliferation of those synaptic branches. So on the left, we're starting prenatally and going up through 2 years. You see how that density just really takes off. And it's the child's everyday experiences and interaction that excite those neurons and cause those branches to form. So this greater communication and integration between all the neurons is what supports increasingly complex behavior and capacity. Now, at the same time, it's a bit of a use it or lose it. The more that connections related to feelings or motor behavior or language are used, then those synapses flourish and strengthen. And the ones that aren't used, that aren't stimulated, will be pruned. They'll die back and go into a dormant state. And so over time, the child's sort of richness of branching becomes more similar to an adult. And this is another way to look at this neurodevelopment. In this figure along the bottom, we have age. So we're starting at prenatal on the left. Then we have months 1 through 12, and then it switches to a year schedule. And each color shows a different area of brain development. Green is auditory, blue is language, red is the prefrontal cortex, which is more higher order thinking. And the curves are showing when are we seeing the most of this synapse formation. And the lines with the yellow are showing when is the myelin being laid down. So what's interesting to me here is that most of the action that's going on is in the first year of life. Yet we focus on preschool at age 4. And so I think neuroscience is suggesting that 4 may be a little late. We should be thinking more about the richness and the appropriateness of children's very early rearing environment. And as you see, as we all know, some of the prefrontal cortex development continues into young adulthood, which is why your adolescence might still be very frustrating at times. So how does this positive experience get into the brain? Through a safe and sufficient physical environment, but we're learning more and more is that a lot of early experience shapes the brain through the loving relationships that kids have with their caretakers. So we've been focusing a lot on what's called serve and return interactions. So infants do a lot of serving. They look at you, they smile, they coo, they reach out. And when adult caretakers respond quickly and appropriately with the smile, with a jiggle, with picking them up, with tickling their belly, each of these interactions stimulates the brain circuits that are relating to communication and emotional development. And just like in a game of tennis where you want to have a lot of long volleys sort of going back and forth, and then it's time to stop and relax for a bit and have your break, that same serve and return pattern of interactions is really crucial in the infant and toddler period. And we're finding now that these interactions actually are crucial in creating a healthy brain architecture. The Harvard Center on the Developing Child has a really nice website with all kinds of resources if you'd like to follow up and look at any of their information or videos. But experience also gets into the brain in a negative way. So here I'm showing slides of, on the left, a healthy 3-year-old child, and on the right, a child who's been exposed to early neglect. And you can see in the gray photo, the difference in volume, and in the fMRI, the differences in what areas of the brain are active when the child's thinking and interacting with the world, and particularly a difference in the frontal cortex areas related to self-control and higher order thinking. And you've probably all heard, right, of the famous Kaiser ACEs study, where retrospectively they found that that people who were afflicted by obesity, high substance abuse, chronic pulmonary obstructive disorder, and other chronic health conditions, if you look retrospectively, they were at higher risk for having been exposed to adverse experiences in early childhood, such as exposure to family violence or substance use, child abuse, or neglect. And we now are starting to have an understanding of how those adverse experiences get into the brain. So for all of us, when we're exposed to a lot of chronic stress, that's regulated by the HPA, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. And if we're exposed to too much stress, your HPA axis can be sort of overreactive, overly sensitive. For our very young children, if that's going on, and they're sort of, in a sense, bathing their brains in stress hormones, we found that has very negative effects on the development of the neuronal branching and size of hippocampus, amygdala, and prefrontal cortex, which are areas that are responsible for emotion, for memory, and for self-control. So the result can be you have an infant or toddler who's kind of always on, who's always fearful, may have difficulty distinguishing safe from unsafe situations, difficulty encoding new experiences into memory, which obviously has consequences for when you enter school, difficulty regulating mood and impulse control, and are generally just more sensitive to mild adverse experiences that other children can cope with more resiliently. So we know that early adverse experiences have tremendous and negative implications for the developing brain. We're also starting to understand the extent to which supportive early environments, including positive early learning settings, can help counteract or modify the negative early experiences. So I hope I've convinced you. Okay. Takeaway 2, it's all about quality. Okay? Just having childcare doesn't mean we're going to reach our goals. So if we're going to invest in childcare or early learning, we have to invest in quality services. And that's because quality is what causes the outcomes. And especially disadvantaged keiki seem to benefit more from high quality services than kids who already have you know, an optimal early start. Very, very high quality has lasting effects. So you've probably all heard about the Abecedarian or the peri-preschool studies. These were studies done in the 60s where we found very large effects for things like language and IQ at the end of the early learning, at the end of preschool when kids enter kindergarten, as well as lifelong effects on academic achievement, less risk for special education, finishing school, not being a teen parent, staying out of the criminal justice system, and having higher lifelong earnings. So wow, magic bullet, right? Well, not all preschool programs have those kinds of effects. Those were unusually intense, unusually high quality, and think of the context of the 1960s where most of the low-income moms did not have a high school education, and the control group had no exposure to early learning. So it's a different context now. The average effect, if you look nationally at kids entering kindergarten with and without that year 4 preschool experience, the average effect on academic preparation is really small, about 0.15 standard deviations. So that's about 2 points on an IQ point kind of scale. But that's because that's the range of places that our kids come from nationally, from good to bad. So I think our best place to look to have a realistic estimate of the potential of what good preschool can do is to look at some of our national evaluations of Head Start and some of the larger state preschool programs. And we do indeed find that there's, a kind of medium-sized effects of around a half to 0.6 standard deviations. So we're seeing small effects on health, medium-sized effects on language, cognitive skills, and pro-social behavior early in school. And we're starting now to see, for some of the state programs that have been around longer, that in middle school and high school, we're seeing about a 6 to 7% reduction in grade retention and special education placement. So the programs do indeed have effects when they're executed well. This was the nation's wake-up call. In the cost, quality, and child outcome studies were our first national studies where people went into preschool and family child care settings and actually observed and measured the quality of the care that was going on. And the take-home message was most of it was kind of mediocre, and a goodly percentage of it in infant toddler centers and family child care was actually so low quality as to be potentially harmful for kids' development. And that was our national wake-up call and led to initiatives, a lot of federal research into early learning, the initiatives to change and improve the Head Start standards and to start state preschool. And what do I mean by quality? Two things. There's two buckets of quality. There's the structural things like group size, the number of, the ratio of adults per kids, staff experience, staff educational qualifications, health and safety regulations. These are easy to count, easy to verify. These are things our state regulates as part of the licensing system. The process aspects, that's the daily thing, the interaction that actually causes good outcomes for kids. So warm teacher-child relationships, rich language interactions and questioning that stimulate thought, and age-appropriate activities and curriculum, a balanced schedule that's got sort of teacher-led and child-led, inside and outside, active and quiet activities, a predictable environment, and high family engagement. These things are much harder to measure and much harder to regulate. In our state, they're largely not regulated. Other states have a quality rating improvement system where centers get rated, like 1 to 4 stars. And usually in those states, to get a 3 or 4 star, you actually have to have observers come to your center and observe the interactions between teachers and kids and rate your quality. So I have a video to show you a bit of what quality might look like. And I'd like you to think about, as you watch this, what do you like about this classroom or not like, and why? And would you want your child to be there?
My eyes are facing forward. I'm standing straight and tall. My hands are behind my back. I'm ready for the hall. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, 0.
This is their first experience in school for the most part. A lot of them have been in daycare or some sort of childcare setting, but then when they come to public school, it's just different.
Can you take me to a party? Sure. Can you drive? Yes.
In my classroom, I use a project approach to learning, and I let the kids guide the curriculum.
What do you think of that idea?
Good.
I think that it's more important for the children to determine what the curriculum is so that they stay engaged. If they're not engaged, then I spend my day managing behavior versus letting them be able to discover and explore and construct their own knowledge of something.
Why do I put this picture on?
We spend a lot of time learning what patience is and waiting, because life is full of waiting. And so I draw their stick with their name on it, and then I ask them to tell me where they're going to play.
Sean, where would you like to play?
I don't know that you want us to play.
Where would you like to play? With these? Okay.
That holds them accountable. That is them saying, I'm going to go play in the dough. So they know they're going to go to the sensory table and play in the dough, that like they've claimed that spot. They're going there, they've claimed their play.
This is a big wedding.
Yeah.
Someone's ready.
The materials I bring in are mostly natural materials. They're open-ended in the fact that they're not task-oriented, because I want them to be able to explore those materials and use them for as long as possible, instead of just having a specific task set to it, like a puzzle. Once the puzzle's done, nothing to do, move on. Those tools that they use in everyday life automatically give them a sense of responsibility and trust, and respect. So they can see that I respect them enough to use adult tools. We have safety procedures to use them safely. So if they're going to get out hammers and things like that, then they need to have their safety glasses on.
I'm going to pass around this owl, and if you have the owl, you can share.
Share times, we do it at least 2 times a day. That gives me an idea of who's following who. I get to see a lot in classroom dynamics and relationships during those little times like that.
And if anybody has the owl, only they can talk.
That's right, because that helps us remember that we need to be respectful and listen to people share their story, right?
6 or 5 weeks from now, my Mimi's gonna open up her pool, and we can go. And me, my brother, and Daddy, and Katie, and Charlotte can go swim in it. My sister fell off the slide when she was a baby. My daddy, he got hit by lightning when he was a little boy.
Really?
No, not yet.
I try to take an alternate activity outside. I just kind of looked on the playground at the students who weren't really engaged. They see me over there. They know that I'm doing something. So if they want to come over, they know they can. But most will choose to play. It's just different on different days. And it also depends what the activity is.
I'm done.
I'm going to squirt a cloud on top. Do you want a big cloud? I'm trying not to get it in my face.
I want a big cloud.
This is sort of my way of doing an assessment. And so instead of sitting down or clicking on bubbles on the computer screen to answer questions, I do my assessments like this.
What's the job of a cloud?
He makes it rain.
I was kind of looking for oral language, what they could tell me, what words they were using. We had just started talking about clouds, so this was all very new, but I wanted to see if they were using any weather vocabulary that we had talked about. Because what?
Because God wants it to rain so the flowers can grow.
Okay. All right, so here's what we're going to do. I wanted to see if they were gathering any information and using those context clues to kind of make a different analysis of what happened with a cloud and water. How many drops do you think you'll put in before it rains? 5? The level of learning is so much deeper if they construct their knowledge with that.
It's time to start cleaning up our centers.
We hope that the things we're doing build their self-confidence and get them those social emotional skills that they need to go on and collaborate and work together in kindergarten.
Hip, hip, hooray!
Thank you.
Probably they're going to do a little technical intervention. What do people think of that classroom? Are there any comments, Valerie?
Anybody in the auditorium? This is the second time I saw it. I absolutely love it. I wish I had that person as my teacher. And I wanted to play with the kids. I'm a big kid.
Well, I don't have children of my own, but I appreciate the fact that the teacher was really showing respect for each of these individuals as individual human beings, you know, and really trying to bring out the best in each one of them. And I don't think that's so common in the more public. It looks like a pretty specialized kind of school system.
And she's doing a lot of what we call differentiation. Like she said, you know, I notice there's kids who aren't engaged on the playground, so I'm going to bring out some stuff that they can use and will be interested in during that time. Were there any online comments?
Yes, there are. So it says the children seem engaged and the teacher seems to care so much. I like the activities that the teacher used to enhance the children's learning skills. I like that she assesses children on the playground and help to engage those that are not participating. And I'll read one more. I like how she focuses on education, but also the social aspect of life.
So a lot of focus on social development, on rich conversations, on open-ended thinking, open-ended inquiry are all what I had said before, sort of age appropriate. Unfortunately, when I talk to coaches and people who visit classrooms in the state, they say, yeah, they see some of this. They also see classrooms where 4-year-olds are expected to sit down and do worksheets for 20 or 30 minutes at a time, which is not developmentally appropriate. Would you guys send your kids to a place like this? I see a lot of nods, but it's a very child-focused, non-academic setting, and you know that's not necessarily what all parents are looking for. I have a friend whose kids were in a Reggio Emilia school, which is a project-based approach, kind of like this. She said, "There's some stuff I really like about it, but I wish it was a little more academic." Definitely, families have different values. Okay. So the other takeaways from section number 1 are childcare is not high quality early learning is not only good for kids, it's good for families, it's good for bosses, it's good for all of us. So we should invest early and often and generously. So childcare is women's largest barrier to workforce participation. And some people say that part of the gender inequity in lifelong learnings has to do with the sort of motherhood penalty. So obviously, having reliable, affordable childcare allows you to work, but it not only increases your current family income, think about it allows you to have an uninterrupted career trajectory. So over the long time, you're more likely to be promoted and you're going to accrue higher retirement benefits. And reliable, affordable childcare decreases family stress and work-family conflict, and can also potentially meet families' developmental goals for their kids. I'm just gonna skip over those two. And as I mentioned earlier, the return on investment. Employers benefit from a stable workforce, so they've got higher skill workforce, less turnover, less training requirements. And the economic studies that have looked at the question of for every dollar we spend now on early learning, what's our benefit in terms of reduced expenses in the future? Those estimates range from $3, I've seen them as high as 11 or 14, but I would say 3 to 8 is the most common range. The President's Council on Economic Advisors under the Obama administration estimated an $8.60 return, and I would love if my retirement portfolio did that well. And this was based on not only like earnings and retirement benefits accrued to parents, but also savings to employers and lifetime income benefits to kids and reduced social costs for special education, healthcare, juvenile justice, etc. So it's an extraordinarily wise investment. And if you look at the opportunity cost, there's evidence that you're going to get the highest return on your public dollar investment the earlier in the lifespan that you spend that money. So I hope I've convinced you that quality early learning experiences have tremendous payoffs. Yes, ma'am.
That teacher was in Oklahoma, is that correct?
Yes, that was.
Okay. I have a question. Oklahoma's a pretty red state. I don't want to get political, but I'm just kind of wondering, do they follow that model? Do they invest in early childhood care there, and do the senators and representatives there and the governor and so on and so forth get it?
Well, I believe that Oklahoma is one of the states, right, that was recently involved with teacher strikes. Yeah. The Tulsa public preschool program is one of the nation's longest running and one of the best researched and one of the most successful. I have not heard that the preschool program in Tulsa has changed. But yeah, that is a good question. And the NIEER, which does an annual yearbook of all public preschool programs, has said that in the past 3 years, they have seen a decrease in public funding nationally. If you're interested in particular states, they got a page on every state.
One other person that wants to make a comment. Is it open Q&A now, or are you still?
Oh, I still got more to go. But
okay.
Okay.
Well, I was just going to go back to the survey from 1994 to 95. And are there been more recent surveys to show good, mediocre, poor, pre-K, or what was that was showing?
So actually, we're in the middle of the National Early Childhood Education Study. In 2019, there's going to be another wave that they started releasing their first results in 2010 or 2012, and that is our most recent nationally representative study of childcare. But what's different about that study is they're looking at all forms of care, not only centers, but family child care homes, family friend and neighbor care. And I don't believe they have released quality data yet. They've released things about where kids are, how much it costs, and children's learning outcomes. Okay, so let me try to give you some highlights of 2 major studies done in our state. So I did the Hawaii Early Learning Needs Assessment in cooperation with the Hawaii Children's Action Network and Executive Office on Early Learning. And the purpose of this needs assessment was to provide information to guide the state as they planned their early learning strategic plan. At about the same time, Early Childhood Action Strategies did a parent survey. So the HELNA, we used population data, we used state licensing records, and we did surveys with all the licensed and regulated providers in the state. Did not get 100% return, but it is a good representation of the licensed and regulated providers in the state. Just to caution, the parent survey was a convenient sample, so it may not present an accurate picture of all of our parents. Okay, so what did we find out? Just to let you know, of our kids under age 6, 2/3 of them almost, their families need childcare because all available parents are, so it's either a single working parent or 2-parent dual earner home are at work. So there should be a need for childcare. About 1/3 of our young kids are in single parent homes. 15% live below the federal poverty line. 20% live at or below 200% of poverty. And as you know, even at the 200% of poverty, you can't make it in this state. Almost 2% receive homeless services, and the total number of homeless children is probably double that because this does not include the hidden homeless. And when you get into cost, remember, I'm always talking about cost for a single child, but many of our families have multiple young children. So according to the parent survey, 2/3 of parents who use some form of childcare used more than one type in the past week. So people are cobbling together multiple providers. And only 13% of parents in our state said, we're able to handle this in-house, that between me and my spouse or my partner, we're able to handle our childcare. Families mostly want full day care, but about 30% of our childcare programs in the state are open less than 40 hours a week and not year round. And there's almost no availability of evening or weekend care, for the parents who work those shifts, and those tend to be our more vulnerable low-wage workers. And why do parents pick the place they have their child right now? It's a mixture of being good for the child and pragmatic things like it's nearby or they had an opening, so I took it. And when you ask parents, what are your interests and needs as a parent, it kind of falls into the group of understanding how to support my child's development, how to create social connections for my child and for me as a parent, and then to a lesser extent, understanding available services. So this is one of the more well-received parts, I think, of our evaluation. We wanted to know, do we have enough childcare to go around? We don't actually know because we don't know the demand. We don't know what every single parent in the state wants. And some parents don't want, don't need. But we do know that there are a bit more than 25,000 licensed and regulated childcare seats in this state, almost all of them in childcare centers, a much smaller number in infant toddler centers or family childcare homes. And if you just do the math, that means there's one seat for about every 4 kids in the state. Is that enough? Maybe only 25% of our parents want childcare for their kids, but almost all centers report having a waiting list and a substantial waiting list. So that suggests that demand is greater than supply. So even though I said it's 1 to 4 statewide, we were interested in community differences. So here I've taken the number of DHS regulated seats in different regions and looked at that as a ratio to the number of young children in that region. And here green is good, meaning that there's less competition for each seat. So the dark green is 2 kids for every seat. Red is bad. So if you live in a Punaka'u area, there's 8 kids potentially competing for each seat. So grim, yes, the colors tell you where you want to live or where you don't want to live if you're needing childcare. Now, not as grim if we're talking about preschool age kids. So statewide, we have about 2.5 kids potentially competing for each preschool center seat. And again, you see that the our rural areas are under-resourced. So the real shocker comes when we look at availability of infant toddler care. So there are 37 young kids under the age of 3 potentially competing for each seat in an infant toddler center. As you can see, white means there are no licensed infant toddler centers on those islands, and the Big Island is pretty much red. So if you're looking for infant toddler care, that's a special scarcity. And I would say that's crisis level scarcity. Where else might kids go? Family child care providers actually care for a large percentage of our infants and toddlers, and they're more likely to be represented on the neighbor islands, so taking up some of the slack. And the family child interaction programs don't provide childcare, but they provide rich early learning experiences. And again, they tend to serve the parts of our state that are less well served by formal centers. But we don't know where most of our kids really spend their day. So the first bar, here's the DHS regulated seats. We know how many are in DOE special education, in EOEL pre-K. You see it's very small, about 2 to 3% of our 4-year-olds. About 3,000 kids a year benefit from the facile programs, but this is leaving a vast number of kids, about 3 times the height of the first bar, who we don't know where they are. They're with parents, they're in FFN care, or they're potentially in illegal childcare settings. How much does it cost? About $8,000 a year for full-time care in a family childcare home. For centers, it's about $9,000 a year for preschool age, climbing up to over $13,000 per year on average for infant toddler care. And I've seen some centers that charge in $21,000, $22,000 a year. So if you put that into perspective, it takes up half of your income if you're a minimum wage worker, 13% of our median family income, and our federal government suggests that affordable is about 7% of family income, and it costs about as much as it does to send your kid to Manoa. And we have college savings accounts, we have financial aid, we have all kinds of information to parents about Save for College, but we don't have a similar financial support system for early childcare. And because of our relatively low wages, we're one of the least affordable states. Not everybody has to pay. If you're eligible and can get a seat in Head Start or Early Head Start, that's free of charge. DHS has both federally funded childcare subsidies and the Preschool Open Door state funded subsidies, which serve a good number of children, but only a minority, we believe, of the potentially eligible children. And these subsidies help parents with the cost of care. The Kamehameha Schools is a tremendous philanthropic source of scholarships for kids with Native Hawaiian ancestry, and military childcare is also extremely cost effective, and military families are eligible for military scholarships. And according to our work, our providers say about 20% of the kids they serve, to their knowledge, get childcare subsidies, and about 11% are able to offer in-house scholarships, and primarily that comes from philanthropic support. Okay. So we know there's not enough, we know it costs a lot. How good is it? Here it's suggested that lead teachers have a bachelor's degree or higher, and at least one of their degrees, bachelor's or associate in early childhood, and that classroom assistants have a child development associate. So as you can see, we're not at 100%, but we're making okay progress. Where I think Hawaii really stands out is we have a high percentage of seats in programs that are accredited. So about 37% of our center seats are in programs with national voluntary accreditation in early childhood, which is an index of quality. Some people say Head Start is an index of quality. And for our facile programs, there's no accrediting body, but they've done amazing things to kind of regulate themselves. So some of them have sought WINHEC, Indigenous Education Accreditation, and one program actually got, the only one in the nation, an accreditation from NAEYC for early childhood, even though they're not a preschool. And you know, we do an okay job. I think we underutilize childcare as an entry point for developmental screening and monitoring. And certainly more programs could be systematically assessing their classroom quality. As you see, the pattern here is that the facile programs are really on the ball in terms of positive assessment practices. And our state public school program, it's small but growing, very focused on quality and teacher professional development. And so the size of our state pre-K is really small, but the quality measures up quite well compared to the nation. So I think that's the landscape. There's not enough, it costs too much, but we really have some bright spots. Any questions or comments on that? Yes, Valerie.
So someone in the broad sense is asking, what about the middle class parents? How do we afford it?
Yes, the gap group. So in our state, the preschool open doors, that's a subsidy with state funds. And so the income eligibility is broader for that. The state also has a small program called Pre-Plus, and that is where the state provides classroom space, usually in DOE campuses, so that private providers can open a classroom and give priority to kind of middle income families. The Pauahi Scholars can apply, they serve many middle income families. But yeah, that's a recognized need within the early childhood community, that the families that earn too much to get a lot of scholarships or subsidies, but still struggle to pay the cost of care.
Good. And similar question, what support for working families, but specific, the person is saying child care is not available in the evenings, 4 p.m. to 12 a.m., 12 a.m. to 8 a.m. So it must be a shift worker. Do you have any tips about that?
Our centers basically provide none of them, almost none of them operate on those hours. When families are able to get evening care, it's usually through a family child care provider, and it's a huge unmet need that by and large we've not addressed with state policy. And I think that's the case in most states. Any others? Yeah.
There's a clarification. What does FCIL mean?
Family Child Interaction Learning Programs. So those are the sort of parent-child play and learn groups that you attend together. So third objective, let me talk a little bit about some of our local programs and resources. And the point of this part of the presentation, I think, is for those of you who work with families who have young kids, some ideas of places that you may direct your families to, and maybe a show of hands just in this room. How many of you work with families that have infants, toddlers, or preschoolers? Okay, not a lot, so you can pass this information on to your friends. So in our state, the Executive Office on Early Learning is responsible for sort of leading and coordinating the early learning system. And in our state, we define early learning as birth through 8. They're a relatively new agency. They were started under the Abercrombie administration in 2012. They're about to release a statewide strategic plan for the next 5 years. And EOEL does not itself provide any early learning programs, but they work hand in hand with the DOE in offering our public preschool classrooms. So EOEL provides learning academies for the teachers and principals, coaches, and professional development to really ensure that our public school classrooms are of strong quality and ever increasing quality. One resource here, this brochure, which you can find on their website, is a very comprehensive listing of both childcare and early learning services available to families in our state, and I brought hard copies that were out of the sign-up table. I think that's a really excellent resource and starting place for families who are looking for either childcare, home visiting, WIC, or these facile kinds of programs. As I said earlier, Department of Human Services is the agency in our state that licenses and regulates childcare. So they license the childcare. They're responsible for childcare subsidies. They also contract for the Childcare Resource and Referral Agency, which I'll explain to you in a minute, and sponsor some scholarships for childcare providers so they can pursue higher education. The applications for the subsidies are on this website. To be honest, it's not the most parent-friendly. If you're working with parents, I would recommend that a good first stop is the Patch website, People Attentive to Children. And so they're contracted with DHS, and Patch is the referral agency. So a parent can call the Patch and talk about where they live and what kind of childcare they're interested in, and Patch will send you a list of all the providers that meet your criterion. Patch also provides no cost or low cost courses and workshops, sort of continuing education sort of format series for childcare providers and family childcare, both in centers and family childcare. And they sort of administer and have links to the applications for scholarships for the childcare providers. They can also refer military families to where you would go to get assistance with finding care in the military childcare system. Has anybody in this room used the Patch website themselves? I see a hand, 2 hands. Are you guys happy with it? I see some nods. Also, This is a sort of a quality improvement program that DHS funds. Learning to Grow is located currently at Windward Community College, and they provide professional development and support for family child care providers and the family friend and neighbor providers who are caring for kids who receive DHS subsidy. So you can spend your DHS child care subsidy to pay grandma or neighbor for child care. It's a much lower rate than if you're a subsidy that's can be applied to family child care homes or to centers. But this is an extremely underserved group. So Learning to Grow sends monthly sort of books and educational packets and ideas to these providers on a voluntary basis. They also have sort of consumer education materials of how to pick and decide what kind of childcare you want. And they have a pilot project where they're working with family childcare homes to become accredited, because there is a national accreditation for family childcare. So they're all about supporting the more informal system providers, and their site also includes online resources of developmentally sequenced learning activities that parents can make access to. So if you have a parent who's looking for ideas of fun games and routines to do at home that support their child's development, you might send them to the Learning to Grow website. Other state organizations related to early learning. So the Department of Education is responsible for our preschool special education classrooms, whereas early intervention for the younger kids is handled under Department of Health. It also does the maternal child home visiting and Healthy Start home visiting. Ki'ile is a program that may be less familiar to people, and that's kind of for the families who aren't eligible for home visiting. There's not enough family or child risk. And so if a parent wants to be in Ki'ile, online they get access to doing the Ages and Stages questionnaire, so they can kind of monitor their child's own development, and they will be sent again based on their screening ideas for activities to do at home with their child. And Healthy Child Care Hawaii, sorry, that's actually sponsored by DHS. I have an error there. So that's an agreement with JAPSOM, our medical school, where they provide training like this for pediatricians and healthcare workers. They also have a cadre of public health nurses who serve as free health consultants to preschools that don't have their own health consultant. And they're working on a pilot project right now to do training for preschool and infant toddler teachers on supporting positive emotional development in kids' classrooms. So some of you who are in the public health nurse system may have colleagues who are involved. As I mentioned before, our Facile programs are an incredible resource to the state. These 4 major organizations, their websites are interesting. Many of them have video testimonials. I wanted to do sort of a special call out to Kapa'alana, which is run by Partners in Development. They serve, I think it's about 250 homeless young children per year in a Facile format, and they are the ones that have the special national accreditation. So they're really doing a tremendous job of reaching a large proportion of our young homeless population. All these programs are currently free of cost to parents, and most of them have a strong cultural focus. We have Hawaiian Language Immersion Preschool, and they've recently opened an infant toddler program. Yeah. Oh. Family Hui. This is more of a parent support group. So the Huis run sort of like 12-week groups. Each group focuses on a particular age span, and they're led by parent volunteers. And Family Support Hawaii has a new program that I think is quite innovative. So First Connections, this is for families in sort of the Kona area of the Big Island. And they recruit moms at birth, and you get sent text messages for the first 3 years. They're very frequent at first about child development and self-care and what to expect. Then they thin out over time. But what's unique about this program first is that the text messaging is locally written, Second, that you can, in addition to the text messaging, chat with a peer counselor and develop a supportive relationship over the, over your cell phone. And that's a unique program in our state. If you want to get involved, I would suggest 2 places you might look. The Early Childhood Action Strategy is a collaborative of over 60 agency, nonprofit providers, higher education folks. They have 6 action teams related to those 6 colored balloons I showed you at the beginning. And they work collaboratively to plan and implement things to support and strengthen our early learning system. And you may also want to know about the Hawaii Children's Action Network, which is our state's advocacy group, not limited to early childhood. They advocate for kids of all ages, and every year they get all the providers together to decide on annual policies to support with the legislature. So they were one of the groups that's been instrumental in trying to get a paid family leave policy in our state. And if you're interested in policy and advocacy, it's a great go-to group. I'm on time. It's a miracle. So, I want us all to think about our core values. What kind of community do we want to be? And are we going to, be one that kind of says, oh yeah, problem, nod, this is grave, or one that actually acts on our beliefs? So let me end with the words of someone who's much wiser than myself. There's no better revelation of a society's soul than the way it treats its children. And so I hope today's presentation has given you some food for thought, and I thank you for all the work that you do in your own ways, whether it's with young children or older kids and adults, to help us bring our families to a state where we have equitable access to the supports that we all need to flourish and thrive and bring back to our communities. And we got about 10 minutes for questions or discussion.
Great, thank you, Barbara. And people are absolutely agree on your last comment, and they are thanking you. Anybody in the audience have a question? And we're waiting for the online people to type their questions. Somebody, yes, I can depend on you. Thank you. Say your name.
So I'm Susan, and again, I don't have children, but I find this all very interesting. And one thing that kind of kept popping up in my mind, early on you were saying how we may be starting the whole preschool too late for our children, but I'm just wondering, is that being advocated for, that children are started like in pre-K, even like at 2 or 3, or is that just something that they've shown that with the developmental stages of the brain that they would probably
and I think that's the beauty of talking about an early learning system and not just preschool, right? Because is a center really the most appropriate place for an infant? I think a lot of people would have grave reservations about that. So when you take a system approach, then the question is, does every child have, safe, enriching, appropriate early learning experiences? And, kids flourish in a wide range of settings. And so when you take that early learning perspective, you want to ask for families that need care because they have to because of work or because they simply want to. Do they have enough options that they can afford, that are good for kids, and hopefully consistent with their values? So if you want a center, can you get a center? If you want family-based care, can you get family-based care? And, infant toddler care is tremendously expensive. You really can't do it for a profit. And so the programs that are able to provide either are generally early Head Start, where there's federal money, or there are larger child care chains where essentially the preschool age classrooms are subsidizing the cost of offering the infant toddler classrooms. And this is an area where there's generally less preparation of the workforce in higher education. And and lower standards, actually, of educational credentialing and quality. And I think that the needs assessment kind of confirmed what people already knew and really put a fire under people about the need to address infant toddler care in particular. And that we're going to see that in the state strategic plan. We're also seeing it reflected in DHS's state plan that they submit to the Child Care Development Fund.
So I was kind of thinking, get a child in even earlier into the system, it kind of just seems like it could have some negative.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily advocating for
Okay.
formal structured center-based care.
Mhm.
I am advocating for across the range of places where kids might be. Are those all good places for them to be? And how do we think of the ways that centers versus family care providers versus kith and kin providers and parents themselves who are home with their kids can be supported in providing a really good environment and start.
I'm Nancy again. I'm just wondering if there's more of a push to get corporations, businesses, where people work to step up to the plate and have centers where they can leave their children. One of the big ones that comes to mind is one of the things I think they have something like, if we can get more of the companies where we work to keep our children, so during our breaks we can go interact with them. I think farming it out to what's going on now is just not as practical and beneficial to the mother and the child as having them have it in the workforce.
I think Patagonia is one of the nation's leaders in on-site workforce childcare, and they found that they really think that it's beneficial for them as an organization in terms of staff stability and loyalty. We have very little work-sponsored on-site childcare in the state. Funny you should mention that. That is one of the issues that the action strategies been trying to interest the business community in. There are some businesses I know that basically sort of pay for slots in some of our existing childcare centers, so that some of the businesses are helping their employees that way. But employer-sponsored childcare is by and large not something that we have a lot of going on in our state.
Okay, we have a question online from Becky. You mentioned that other states have a QRIS system. Is there any movement for Hawaii to develop a similar QRIS system?
So the QRIS, Quality Rating Improvement Systems, the idea behind that comes from the feds, is that if centers are rated by quality, and that's made public, and parents are educated about the importance of quality, then parents are going to gravitate towards the higher quality centers, and those that aren't high quality are going to be incentivized to improve. And the more mature QRIS systems, that goes hand in hand with supports and professional development to help sites improve. There's, I believe, 8 states that do not have a QRIS at the moment. Hawaii did a pilot several years ago, but to my understanding, there's not current plans for us to have one. And for the ones that do, from what my understanding of the research about how well they're working out is that families, I think, often underutilize the information. And there's kind of a mixed picture about the extent to which, our child development outcomes actually better in the higher rated centers. Some states are finding yes, some states are finding that they're not seeing a lot of effects. But all of this is still very new, and most of the systems have not been in place for very long. And in many of the states, its participation in the QRIS is voluntary and not required of all centers.
I'm not up to date on what's going on federally, but wouldn't it be nice if our parents could be paid to stay home with their children?
Wouldn't it now?
I have a friend in Sweden who was able to stay home the first 4 or 5 years with her children, They saved her job for her, so it was secure. My daughter lives in Australia. She just had a baby last year. She's been able to stay home the whole first year, uh, with secure job, with some financial assistance, and now she's going back. The government pays for her child care for the baby.
Let's
And there's
throw
no-
them all out in Washington.
There is no, she doesn't have to be low income for that benefit. It's across everybody. And I know that gets into our tax system. I know it's complicated, but I think it's time.
Thank you for that comment and sharing all those examples. That was something I did not include, and maybe I need to, is looking cross-nationally at what do other countries provide in terms of paid family leave, and what do other countries provide in terms of universal preschool or universal childcare. And some also have universal home visiting to support new moms in the postpartum period. Yeah, we are basically the only major industrialized country that does not have significant parental leave. And not all countries give you years and years at a time. Generally, the Scandinavian countries are the most generous. And you do see, yeah, that in some countries, you can stay home for 1 or 2, sometimes 3 years at, half to maybe 80% of your pay and get the job back. Some countries have both paternal as well as maternal leave. Generally, and the idea was that that was going to increase gender equality. It hasn't worked out that well because generally still the women take it and the guys don't. But I believe there's 1 or 2 countries where to get like the full maximum leave period allowed for a family, both parents have to take their share.
We have another question online from Stephanie. Is there a way to get comparative information about the infant toddler programs on Oahu?
Well, so Patch will have information on, all licensed infant toddler centers. So, their location, what they charge, their hours, what age groups they serve, because, not all might take the very young infants. Our state does not do any systematic collection of quality information and release of that. Pat should be able to tell you, though, whether or not that center is accredited.
So my area, I'm fascinated with this, Barbara. I just think you did a fabulous job, and I am a systems person, and I work with older adults. That's my area of interest. And we, of course, have grandparents taking care of their grandchildren. And it seems to me, with the examples that you just gave and staying home, that we could somehow sync this up better. And one of the, I'm the practicum coordinator for the MPH students, and one of them did a fabulous project on time banking, where they would actually get credit for taking care of kids, elders taking care of kids, or someone taking care of kids and watching some elders. And then somebody would exchange out, what do you need? Oh, I need my car fixed, or I need transportation, or whatever. And so then this becomes a bank of time that you give time, and then you get something. Have you heard about that? Or
no, so kind of like a structured sort of barter mutual support system. Was this just a concept she was researching, or is this actually in practice somewhere?
I think it's used in one state, but it's mostly in other countries. It's very popular, and I read all about it when she was doing it. But it just seems like it might be a solution here, because here we are on these islands, no place to drive like on the U.S. continent, and we could really figure out our little system here, because even though the traffic's horrendous, we aren't that far apart from each other. We could pick up kids and get them to places, that sort of thing. I just wanted to make that comment, and I like how your system is set up, how and your resources. So thank you so much.
So there are, grandparent caretakers are a big issue. at the center last year, 2 of our faculty did sort of a report on caretaking grandparents in our state, so you can get an idea sort of how many there are. UH, between Manoa and Maui, the Cooperative Extension Service has a program called Grand Cares, which provides support for grandparents who are taking care of kids. Our state actually has fewer grandparents who are custodial than in most other parts of the country, and that's because our substance abuse issues are generally not as severe, at least among parents with young kids. But definitely, you know, grandparents and family members, their contributions in terms of child caretaking are, you know, an incredible resource and sort of undervalued contribution and to both our state economy and family well-being.
Thank you. And we're just at 1:30, and so we have lots of positive comments online, and let's thank her. Thank you for already clapping. And
Thanks
we appreciate
for coming and joining the action strategies.
Yeah, we appreciate you being here. Thank you, everybody, and see you next month. I think it's November 9th. It's a little early because of some conflicts. Next month on persuasive communication.